My name is Emily, and I work the closing shift at a small bar in the quieter part of my town. The place is right next to the highway, but the parking lot also has a back entrance accessible to the townspeople. It's nothing fancy, just a dimly lit spot where regulars know each other by name. And the jukebox has been playing the same selection of classic rock for years. Most of our customers are locals, passing truckers, and the occasional lost tourist looking for a strong drink. I like the place. The routine is predictable, the tips are surprisingly good, and I've learned to handle the usual clientele, the talkers, the flirts, the silent drinkers, and those who just want to be left alone. Weekends are obviously busier, but the thing about working weekdays is that I'm expected to do my night shifts alone. I don't even have a barback who shows up occasionally. Yes, it's an easier and slower job during the week, but I miss the company of my coworkers. I tend to be quite vigilant during my shifts because there are occasional bar fights, considering the type of clientele we attract. That's why I noticed the guy immediately. It was after 2 in the morning on a Tuesday when he walked in. If I had to guess, I'd say he was in his 40s, but he was extremely well-groomed, not the kind of appearance you'd expect from someone his age in an area like this. He wore a black turtleneck sweater under a black coat, definitely well-dressed but in a casual way. I'm not sure how to explain it, but he had an aura of sophistication that makes you think of money, real money, not the flashy kind. He looked around slowly before quickly walking to the bar and taking a seat. I also remember he had an unusually good posture, but that's beside the point. When I approached, he looked at the bottles behind me and ordered something from the top shelf without hesitation. As I served his drink, he asked if I liked working there with a smile on his face. It was a pretty normal question, so I honestly told him I did and smiled back. Then I made a joke about being a bartender or something like that. I wish I could say he gave me a weird vibe, but that wasn't the energy he gave off. He genuinely seemed like a nice guy, like the single dad at his son's baseball game who high-fives the whole team. He chatted with me for a while, which I didn't mind since the bar was pretty quiet at that moment. Eventually, he asked if I had ever thought about doing something bigger, which I admit was a bit strange, but not entirely out of place given the situation. I gave him my standard bartender smile and told him I was happy for now. He nodded and drank his drink, seemingly disappointed by my answer for reasons I didn't understand. After a long pause, he asked what time I got off, out of nowhere. That question caught me off guard. I hadn't sensed any flirting from him, so I was a bit disappointed to find out that our conversation had just been another empty attempt to get my number. I smiled and gave him a vague answer, trying to brush him off in a friendly way without seeming rude. Before he could respond, I busied myself cleaning the counter, but he didn't insist. He just smiled as if he already knew, then finished his drink and pulled out a $100 bill, leaving it gently on the bar as if it were nothing. Without saying another word, he walked out into the night. I didn't know what to make of the encounter. I know it sounds like nothing, but his behavior was so off my radar that it intrigued me. Either way, I thought I'd never see him again and went on with my life. However, it turned out I was wrong. About a week later, he returned, only this time he wasn't alone. There was a woman with him. She caught my attention since I hadn't seen her before. She seemed to be in her 30s and dressed in a way that didn't quite match her age, modern but out of place, like someone trying too hard to fit in with a younger crowd. I watched her closely as the two of them approached the bar. Everything about her seemed calculated, from the way she smiled too easily to the way she leaned on the bar as if we were already friends. As I placed napkins in front of them, the first thing she said wasn't a greeting or a drink order, but a compliment. She put on an overly cheerful smile and said, "You're very pretty," as her fingers brushed my arm, lingering a second longer than normal. I laughed and thanked her, but immediately noticed something was off about this woman. The man didn't speak, which also seemed a bit strange, given that the last time they ordered drinks, he had been very talkative. That's when the questions started pouring in. The woman asked how long I'd been working there, my age, and a bunch of other trivial questions. I answered with short, polite sentences, but I felt this wasn't just small talk. She was studying me. At one point, she looked at the man. It seemed like they were communicating without speaking. Then she looked back at me and said she ran an exclusive event club. She leaned in a bit as she said it, lowering her voice as if to prevent another customer from overhearing. She told me she was always looking for young, fun people for private parties, and that I could make $12,000 in a weekend. I let out a small forced laugh and told her it sounded too good to be true. She insisted it was real and told me that many girls like me worked for them. Her smile never wavered, which was starting to creep me out. She steered the conversation back to the job, repeating words like fun, safe, exclusive. Then casually, she said I should step outside for a moment, that there was someone who could explain it better. My pulse quickened. I wasn't playing around at that point. I didn't even bother pretending I wasn't scared. "I'm good," I said in a firm voice. No smile on my face this time. Just then, a group of customers walked in laughing and talking loudly. The woman's expression changed instantly, her friendly mask slipping slightly before she turned to the man beside her. Without another word, they left. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't unsettled after that. Those random people had just proposed something to me for God knows what. I told my coworkers and my boss about the situation, and we all agreed to keep an eye out should those people return. My boss assured me he was always 10 minutes away by car if I needed him, and that the bar's security cameras were usually enough to deter any misbehavior. There wasn't really much more I could do. It's not like those people had done anything illegal. I tried to push it out of my mind, but a few nights later, as I was closing up, I saw the car. It was parked across the street, engine off, just sitting there. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but the feeling of being watched crawled over my skin like static as I walked to my car. I kept my head down, my keys clutched tightly in my hand. When I pulled out of the parking lot, I checked my mirrors. The car followed. It stayed back just enough to avoid suspicion, but every turn I made, it was still there. I took a random turn onto a side street, and it followed. Another turn, and it was still there. I started freaking out internally. I knew it was them. I forced myself to stay calm, to think, and without hesitating, I drove into the parking lot of a county police precinct, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles practically turned white. The second I pulled in, the car sped off. Nothing happened after that for a while, but I knew it wasn't over. It turned out I was right. It was a slow weekday shift, barely anyone coming in. By midnight, I was wiping down the counter, half thinking about closing early when the door creaked open. It was the woman. I immediately sent my boss a text as discreetly as I could. I looked up, and the woman was staring at me with that same artificial smile. She walked slowly to the bar and sat down with her hands neatly folded. I was debating whether to tell her to leave when she said she thought she'd come to check on me. My stomach started twisting, but I did my best to hide it. I told her we were about to close and that she had to leave, but she made a pouty face and asked for just one old-fashioned. I thought about denying her, but I figured pouring the drink would stall her long enough for my boss to arrive, so I turned around and got started, trying to keep my cool. And then I heard it, the soft, unmistakable click of the front door shutting. I whipped around. The woman was gone. I felt this awful pit in my stomach as I stepped toward the entrance. Through the glass, I saw it, a black van idling just outside. Without thinking, I locked the door as quickly as I could, but then metal rattling from the back door. Someone was trying to get in. I didn't think. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could, a metal shaker, and clutched it like a weapon while dialing 911 with my other hand. There was no way the police would get there in time, so I thought about making a run for it out the front door, but I didn't for some reason. I was bracing myself for a fight when I saw headlights pulling into the lot. It was my boss. The sounds at the back door suddenly stopped, and a few seconds later, the van pulled out of the lot with a screech. I hugged my boss and told him what had happened, and he said he had gotten the license plate of the van as it was leaving. When the police arrived, my boss reviewed the security footage with them. It was worse than I had imagined. Just before the woman left, the cameras had captured two masked figures crouching near the front door, waiting. There was another person in the back who was banging on the door with his fist, clearly trying to flush me out to the front. It was downright horrifying. To make matters worse, the plate number my boss had caught turned out to be unregistered. It's been quite a while since this incident, but no progress has been made. The only good news to come out of the whole thing is that my boss doesn't make me work alone anymore. Despite that, I'm still extremely uneasy anytime I'm scheduled for a night shift. I still question how they knew I'd be working alone. It doesn't make any sense. Even now, I often think about what would have happened had I given in to fear and run out the front door. I used to work the night shift at a convenience store gas station on a quiet stretch of highway. I say used to because after what happened to me a few months ago, I won't work a night shift again. It's a small station, the kind that barely gets any customers when it gets late. Most of my shift was spent restocking shelves, cleaning counters, and occasionally serving a trucker or traveler passing through. I remember everything clearly. It was just past 3 in the morning. By then, even the truckers had stopped coming, and I was left with nothing to. I mindlessly scrolled through my phone trying to kill time. At one point, I stepped outside for some air, rubbing my hands against the cold. I exhaled a few times, watching my breath disappear in the chilly air. The parking lot was empty, just the pumps, the road, and the dark stretch of trees beyond. The neon sign flickered faintly, and I remember the air being misty, like you could see the moisture in it. Despite the highway not being far off, everything was pretty silent. Just as I was about to head back into the store, I noticed something move out of the corner of my eye. I quickly turned my head and realized there was a person behind one of the pumps. How had I not noticed him before? He was wearing a dark red hoodie with his hands in his pockets. There was no car in sight, so he obviously wasn't fueling up. The strange thing was, he didn't seem to be heading toward the store either. He was just there, half turned toward the store, as if watching me. At first, I thought maybe he was waiting for someone, but something about the way he moved made me uneasy. He moved in a strange way, like in a circular pattern. I went back into the store but made sure to keep an eye on him through the glass. I watched him while pretending not to, hoping someone would come and pick him up or something. But after a few minutes, he started walking toward the door, slowly at first, then suddenly entering as if he had made up his mind all at once. He approached the counter but didn't say anything right away, just looked at me as if he was sizing me up. Then, in a rushed and almost rehearsed way, he muttered that his car had broken down just before the pumps. He said he needed a jump or maybe just a little gas to get to the next town. I was literally in shock. He wasn't even trying to make his story believable. I couldn't believe he actually expected me to buy his story. I offered to call a tow truck instead. No, he said quickly, shaking his head. He just needed a flashlight, maybe some help checking under the hood. Something was definitely off, that much was clear. The way he spoke, the way he watched my reaction, it felt like a test. However, to be fair, people who come into gas stations at that hour are usually a bit strange, and I started wondering whether he actually needed help and was just an odd person or on something. I asked him where his car was parked, and he told me it was just beyond the highway entrance. Obviously, I was skeptical, but then he pointed at the monitor behind me. I turned to look at the screen, and to my surprise, there actually was a car parked there. I thought to myself, oh crap, maybe this guy really does need help. And that's when it hit me. I had just been outside and would have remembered a car parked there. I glanced back at the monitor and saw the slightest movement near the car's rear bumper. Someone was crouching just out of view. A wave of dread hit me. I forced a casual smile and agreed to help the guy, but first, I told him I needed to grab my phone from the back office. I turned slowly, not wanting to spook him, but as soon as I was out of his direct sight, I pressed the emergency panic button under the counter. The alarm went off instantly, blaring through the store. I expected him to attack me, but what he did was even more unsettling. His nervous energy disappeared. No more fake urgency, no more shifting from foot to foot. He actually relaxed. His whole body language changed, and then he smiled. It wasn't a panicked smile or an embarrassed one, but a slow, knowing grin. Like he had all the time in the world, like this was amusing to him. I was in shock. I didn't even have time to react physically. In one fluid motion, he turned and bolted. I ran to the monitors just in time to see both of them take off, not toward the car, but into the woods behind the station. The car just sat there, engine off, headlights off, no one inside. By the time the police arrived, it was exactly as I saw it. The car was still there, but the men were gone. No footprints leading away, no sign of them anywhere. Then, one of the officers pointed out something I hadn't noticed before. The front passenger door was open. There had been a third person inside the whole time. The police took my statement, and I handed over the surveillance footage. That was it. A few days later, they followed up with me. They had the car towed and ran the plates. It turned out it had been reported stolen nearly a week earlier, over 115 miles away. No one had come forward to claim it. No reports of missing persons, no other crimes linked to it. Just an abandoned vehicle in the middle of nowhere with no explanation. That was months ago, and still there are no updates. I don't know why convenience stores are such popular targets, but I can say for sure that I will never work another night shift again. This happened a couple of weeks ago. I work the night shift at Target. It's not the worst job in the world, but after a while it feels like you're just floating through time. The nights blend together, the same shelves, the same routine, the same dull hum of the lights. I hope something better comes along soon. I usually handle the electronics section, which is nice because it's quieter than other areas. People don't typically come in at 2 a.m. to buy phone chargers or Bluetooth speakers. Most of the customers are night owls killing time or truckers grabbing last-minute supplies before hitting the road again. That's why I noticed that man. At first, I didn't think much of him, just another guy wandering the aisles, probably waiting for someone. But after a few minutes, I realized he wasn't shopping, not even pretending to. Every time I looked up, he was nearby, hovering in the next aisle or standing too still in the clearance section. He wasn't looking at anything, just standing there, watching me. I told myself I was overreacting. The store is big, and maybe he was just taking his time. But the way he moved, always close enough for me to notice, never actually picking anything up, made me nervous. I expected him to come over and ask for my number, but he never did. It was like he wanted me to see him, which didn't make sense to me. I tried to use my radio to alert someone, but I realized the batteries must have been dead because it wasn't working. Finally, I started debating whether I should find a manager when I felt a hand wrap around my arm. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but before I could react, a female voice rang out loud, friendly and overly familiar. She exclaimed, "There you are," before launching into a spiel about how she'd been looking for me everywhere. I turned completely confused and saw a woman I had never seen before in my life. She was smiling, with a firm grip on my arm, like we were old friends reuniting. Before I could say anything, she leaned in and whispered, her tone dropping to something urgent. "That guy has been recording you, follow me." My stomach dropped. I turned my head slightly to glance back, and the man was still there, only now he wasn't even pretending to browse. A wave of fear washed over me. I let her lead me, not even questioning it. The way she grabbed my arm, the way she spoke so loudly and casually, like we were two old friends reuniting, I clung to that. I was beyond grateful that someone had realized what was going on and put herself in an uncomfortable position just to help me. She kept up the act as we walked, rambling about something, maybe a trip she had taken, or an inside joke we supposedly shared. I barely processed the words. My thoughts were stuck on him. Had he really been recording me? That was creepy as hell. I wanted to know if he was still following us, but I couldn't muster the courage to turn around just yet. The woman steered me through the aisles, moving fast. I barely noticed where we were going, only that we were moving away from that man. Honestly, I expected her to stop pretending to know me at some point, but she kept it up. At one point, it was getting a little uncomfortable, so I glanced behind me, and to my relief, that man was no longer following us. The woman kept pulling me forward, though I told her that we were good now, and that we should probably go find my manager. But she just squeezed my arm tighter, telling me that he was lurking somewhere. I thought to myself, so what? What's he going to do in a store full of employees? I was obviously worried at first because no one was around, but now that I wasn't alone, I started realizing that there wasn't much point in being scared anymore. I told her this, but she continued moving. I told her I was serious and planted my feet, twisting my arm slightly to loosen her grip. "You can let go now," I said, but she didn't. She smiled at me, but something in it was off. "Come on, just a little further," she said, basically tugging me at that point. I looked around. The store was practically empty. We had passed the registers, the self-checkout area, the aisles with the most foot traffic. The warehouse section loomed ahead, dimly lit and nearly empty. Beyond that was the side exit, the one without cameras, the one employees use for loading shipments. That's when it dawned on me she was leading me straight to the exit. I didn't think. I screamed for help as I yanked my arm free of her grasp with all my might. She lost her grip just enough for me to pull free. I didn't waste another second. I turned and ran toward the front of the store. As I fled, she yelled out something behind me, calling me by my name, which I hadn't given her. I kept running until I saw one of my coworkers coming toward me, most likely reacting to my screams. I told them to call security, which they promptly did. However, by the time I told my story to the security guards, that woman and that man were nowhere in sight. They reviewed the security footage, and just as I suspected, the woman and man had walked into the store together. She had been with him the entire time. The man's face was clear as day in one of the frames, but hers was always turned away. I had a feeling she was the mastermind behind the whole thing, so I was infuriated that the cameras hadn't picked up her face. Every second of it had been planned. The police got involved, and the whole thing went down as a failed abduction attempt. I'm still waiting for a resolution about it. That man should definitely be easy to track down, given his face was caught on camera. I have no idea how that woman knew my name. That's what terrifies me the most. Those people hadn't just picked me at random. I was a direct target.